Okay, so hello, good evening, everyone. I hope you will all like the song. And so my name is Shruti. I'm a quality consultant from Trendic, and it is my honor today to host this meetup event. I hope you will all enjoy the evening with us. So I hope you all can hear me well, and then let's get started. So we know that this event won't happen without excellent sponsors. Sorry, that's my audio. We all know that this event won't happen without excellent sponsors. So I want to use this opportunity to thank our sponsors for the support. For example, Southlamp is one of our sponsors. They provide excellent testing infrastructures and cloud-based test automation platform. And Trendic is company that we provide event. For example, the agile testing days at Postman. I hope you all know that it's a very popular testing event. So Trendic is the organizer of it. Besides the event, we also have the consulting services to help each company to overcome their quality challenges. Tui Amusement also finance our Zoom account so we can host so many people and do the recording of the meetup events. So please feel free to visit the sponsors website and give them some hard time to crash their website and see how many load they can take. So if you pass any of our events, no worries, please visit our website. There we have all the meetings and the meetup events recorded. You can find all the past events there. So just check it out. So now is the main part. Today we have Gil with us. He's from Israel, so a little bit far away. And it's a little quite late there. So Gil is CEO and the owner of Testing Gil, and he's also a very famous international keynote speaker. We are very happy to have him here to share his time and experience with us and also share his stories. So very welcome, Gil, for your time. I hope you also enjoy the evening with all the audience here.
Of course. With that soundtrack, how can one not pass the evening well?
Cool. And one last thing, organizational things before we hand over to Gil. So if you have any questions in between the meetup, please feel free to note it down in the chat. We either will collect them in the end or Gil, maybe it's related to your content and he will answer it on the go. So please do not hesitate to write down your questions in the chat. So I think that's all from my side, and I will hand over to Gil. That's the most important, interesting part of the tonight. So I will stop sharing. Gil, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Where did it go? IT problems for the win. Just a minute. Yeah. So if you listen to the words in the song, he asked that he can't really understand. He can't decide between liking Picard or Kirk better. So this is going to be about Spock today. Hi everyone. Welcome. It's evening. I'm guessing it's evening everywhere. For the people who came here, I'm just fighting the toolbar, the Zoom toolbar. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we're going to talk about exploration and talk about API exploration today. There's a lot of content and about exploration, exploratory testing in books, in magazines, around the water coolers. Not a lot is talked about exploration in the context of APIs. API is mostly about automation and checking status and stuff like that. So we're going to talk about what is exploration and apply that to API testing. And I hope it's going to be beneficial for you. Let's start with the most important slide, me. So I'm Gil, I'm based in Israel. I do, apart from these kind of talks, training and consulting about everything related to making software better. That includes developers, testers, other people who hang around those guys like product people and DevOps, and trying to connect dots and help everybody make something better than they used to do it before. I'm the author of these 2 books. You can get in touch with me with these kind of links on Twitter and social networks as well. But that's enough about me. Let's talk about Captain Kirk here. So if you've watched Star Trek V, this came up when he's asking the would-be God, what does God need with a spaceship? So I'm asking, what does software need with testing? And of course, every one of us has done some kind of testing before, even not formally as users of applications. So I think it's important to say we have kind of an image of what testing really is. So I know it sounds simple, but I'd like to reiterate that because this will lead us to exploration. So this is a map of the galaxy, if you haven't seen it before. And I mapped that like the 4 things that we consider testing. The first one is the one that we think of, the proving requirements. So we have some kind of a spec, and it tells us when you press this button, the next building should explode. Therefore, we know how to test this thing. We translate it in our mind or in our keyboards to software, and we're going to test it. We can translate the rules or specifications into something that we can test. It could be tested manually, automatically, it doesn't really matter. But when we think about testing, this is what we think. But this is not the only thing. Let's talk about checking expectations. Now, if you've been to one software project, you probably know that the spec doesn't hold everything. If you just, let's say I told you to build an email client. So, and it says in the spec that when you press the button, the email gets sent to the address. So it doesn't say in the spec that it has to, the mail has to arrive somewhere, because we kind of used email before. So we kind of do things in our mind, connect the dots and say, well, if other mail clients do that, like Outlook or Gmail, send out emails and the email messages get to the recipient, we assume that ours should do that too, even if the spec doesn't say that. So we kind of fill in with our expectations, and these expectations come in, and this is kind of connecting to its sibling there, confirming assumptions, something that's based on our experience. We used some things like that before, and therefore we have some kind of expectations. We have some assumptions of how things are expected to work. For example, in our email example, yes, we expect the email, the recipient of the email to get the email. We also expect not to, we assume that it's going to be like in less than a day, because that's how email works, like talking about minutes. It doesn't have to say that in the spec, but we assume that this is things that are working in things that are, we referenced, look the same of what we're doing. This is going to be the same, but the way we're going to test it. So all these 3 kind of converge into something that is, I want to check that something is working according to some criteria. But then there's the final one, the exploration. Exploration is really saying, well, I don't know. We may think that we know how things are going. We know that we have some kind of expectation, but we don't know how it's actually working. And this is exploring. Exploring is learning how things are going. So, for example, if you're in our email program, and instead of pressing the send button once, you do this. I don't have the sound effects. If you do that, what will happen? So well, you have some kind of guess, you have some kind of expectation, but in the end, you actually want to know how your application that you spent a lot of time building will actually do that. Will it send like 30 messages? Will it be smart enough to say that it sent this message and not? You don't know. If you wrote the code, you might have an expectation of what actually is happening there. But if you haven't, you want to learn. And this is exploration. It might be useful to remind ourselves that even when we're testing on my machine, obviously it's not going to be like the production environment. But also if you have like staging areas for testing and you have a pre-production staging area, it is still not exactly like what's going on in production. What we're doing really is that we're thinking about what we're testing, seeing the results and say, this is probably going to work the same in the next environment. And if you look at the continuous integration pipeline, this is actually what we do. If it compiles on my machine, it will probably compile for other developers. If it's testing for me, if the tests are passing, it will be the same for the entire team. If it's the unit tests are passing, therefore it's good enough to run the integration tests. Integration tests are passing in a development area, it will probably work the same in a pre-production and so on and so on. So we don't know that things will actually work in production, but we look at the results of the tests and say, this is what we know, this is what we learned, this is what runs automatically, this is what we explored and know. And from this, we kind of get all the knowledge that we can in order to say, okay, it's okay to move on to the next environment. So exploration is about the learning stuff, things that we don't know. And the more complex our systems, it is going to be very valuable to learn, because if your system is like microservices and microservices and microservices, and you haven't tested it thoroughly, you probably want to learn how things will work out before you actually put it into the production environment. So exploration is about the things that we don't know or don't expect or don't confirm. So we're talking about exploration. We can't talk about exploratory testing without mentioning the Bible of exploratory testing. This is the book by Elizabeth Henriksen, Explore It. I really recommend reading it if you haven't yet. And she says in one of the first pages in the book, exploratory testing involves scouting around areas that the net doesn't cover. This net is the spec. Okay, you actually learn things that maybe the spec was not clear enough, maybe it was clear enough, but you learn that it was something that the product owner had in mind, but actually the developers had something else in mind. And the thing is that you interact with the implementation, designing and executing tiny experiments in rapid succession, using the results from the last experiment to inform the next, which means that you press buttons, you see what's happening, and then you decide what your next step is. Now, why is that important? If you've done some kind of test procedure manually, and I've done those in my life, these could take like minutes, these could take like days. I worked on 20 years ago now, on software that runs machines, like very big machines, complex machines, and those are medical devices, and we had test procedures to run like for 2 days, like running samples and stuff like that. But everything there in the procedure was step by step by step by step. And it's not like we wrote it once and it was like okay for the rest of the machine's life or the software's life. It got changes, but when you were doing when you were running the procedure, you would do step by step by step by step, and you probably at some points, but most of the time, you would not just see what's happening and then say, that's interesting, let's try something else. No, you probably move on to the next step in the procedure. And in exploration, and what Elizabeth Anderson is talking about says, look at what you got, and then you decide to do something that you didn't expect to do, because you didn't build a plan for that, because if it was a plan, it would be in the procedure. So the idea is to run these small experiments, small steps, pressing buttons, filling fields. We'll talk about how to do this, how this translates into APIs, and see the result. And then you say, okay, what would be interesting to look at next? Or this is interesting, I want to dig deeper and see what's happening. So that's the idea of exploration. There's a whole book for that, obviously. Now, there's a whole toolkit of things that we can use when we're doing that. I'm going to mention two things. Let me describe two things. And not these guys, although a phaser can always come handy, even in testing. The first one is session-based testing. Session-based testing is, the idea is that if you're running test procedures for 2 days, I'm not sure if you've done this before. Maybe if the first time that you run it, it's okay. And next time, not so much. If you were doing that, this is my regression test that runs for 3 days, and I have to run it like every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, then and that was the cycle there. You would get very bored, because this was done manually. And when you're doing things manually, and the reason that we have automation, one of the things that we do that is that we make less errors. We are more, when we're doing this like over and over again and for long pieces of time, we become tired, we become bored, we miss things. We don't want that. And automation actually helps us with that. But automation cannot help us with exploration, because automation means you need to do this, 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 and this, and look at this. It's like taking the procedure and automating that. And usually automation testing it can be part of exploration by getting you to a point, but automation means that it is scripted. So we enter again to the human part of the equation, where we actually need to use our minds. And if you look at it, if you've been human for a while, you know that it's hard to do, to concentrate, how to do this for a long time. So the idea about sessions is that we're going to limit the session of testing in time, do a time box. How long? It really depends. It could be like 15 minutes. It could be like 2 hours, not more than that. People get bored after doing something for you, even interesting, for something like an hour and a half. They need a break in order to keep like the mental state sharp. So usually we're talking about something with 15 minutes, 30 minutes would be good for a session. You say, how much can I learn in a session like that? How much as you can. And then if you see that you need more, then you create your more sessions. The idea is that since you can't limit the scope, you limit the time. If you know about something about agile principles, it's exactly the same, because agile deals with people. So the idea is the idea of sprints is that it doesn't matter how much you fit in, this is the time that you have. So so it's session based. The idea is that you say, I'm going to fill my time with sessions that I can concentrate on stuff, not miss stuff, be alert. And when I do that, I will learn a lot about this. So that's one tool, and that's planning. How am I going to, what am I actually going to do in this session? Well, you have charters. Now, charters like, they are not really detailed. They are like 1-2 sentences. I'm going to check on the email thing that we sent. I'm going to check about if the content of the email is edited correctly. I'm going to check if the connection, if I'm sending an email, it got out with attachment, not without attachment, stuff like that. Things that you are interested in learning, how things are working. And this could fill up like a whole board, even a Jira board, because you're going to do a lot of testing. You want to learn a lot. And you're probably going to learn based on, well, I have this kind of suite of tests, automated tests that actually check these things. Apart from that, I want to learn something else. So the charter is not too much detailed way of saying the next time I'm going to the session, this is what I'm going to focus on. And the reason it's not detailed, like regular procedures, is that remember, we're going to react to what we're seeing. There's a big chance that we're saying, this thing that I just saw requires a lot more than 15 minutes. I'm going to need like an hour on that. So I want to spend my rest of the day working on these kind of sessions. So I add notes to my board. And this can be quite dynamic based on what I see, which is good because I saw stuff. They're interesting to me. I want to see how things are going and how they are working. So there's not much point in like detailing everything in every step of the way. So the charter is like a scope limiter. What you need to do with that, it's where you're going into the session. I'm going to focus on that. Now, you're human, I'm human too. So when you do that, there is a chance that you're saying, that's interesting, I want to check that. And then you decide what to do. You say, well, I've entered with a charter of one and came out with knowledge about something else. Or you say, well, this deserves another session, another separate session. I'm going to put a note on the board. So the next session will be about that and continue working within the charter. It's up to you. It's like a guidance that for yourself and like for multiple people on the team on what to focus on. So session-based, limiting the time that we're going to spend, charter limiting the scope, or at least putting some kind of guidance to say we're going to focus on that. And if we're kind of feeling that we're taking too much off the road, it's a way to either get back and say, okay, new road. So I give you all kinds of examples in terms of emails and buttons and stuff like that. How does this apply to APIs? Well, API seems like they're like black boxes of something. Like this is my interface, gonna dump something in, gonna see what's coming out, and it looks like a unit test, really. Like, what does a unit test do? It checks a function. You dump something in, see what's coming out. Only APIs have two things that are different than like the unit test. First of all, they're a lot more complex. You can set a lot of things in different ways on a single API, and I'm going to show you that. And the second thing is that what's happening over the wall behind the API, the implementation, may be quite complex as well. So if you actually want to see that an API works, you can do this in multiple ways. You can check that it just returned an OK. Excellent. Does it mean that it actually worked? Probably not. So you probably want to see like how it works with other APIs. And these are the things that either the happy path or regular workflow, stuff like that, you probably want to automate because you'll check it once, you'll see that it actually works. You want to see that it actually works again. But when you're going to explore APIs, you're going to learn a few things that you didn't know because you're going to have ideas of what you're seeing. It gives you ideas to what you can do. So there are two ways to do that. I'm going to show you two demos today. Well, the first one is you may have heard about this company called Google. Where's my Google? So yeah, this Google. So what I'm showing you is the Google page. I am going to concentrate it. This is like the Chrome DevTools. and it has, if you have Google or Edge or any Chromium-based thing, you have something similar like that, obviously, WebKit as well. So you have a network path and a network tab, and it kind of collects all the APIs that's being sent to the server. So just XHR is actually constant. I'm kind of filtering all the requests. And if I just do like a refresh here, you see that the API going to Google with a search, see, going to google.co.uk, actually, it comes up with a lot of arguments. So if you look at it, you say, what do all these arguments mean? How can I play with them? So for example, if you like do something like it and you press here, you see that as I'm typing, things are being descended. You can already see that even if you don't have had anything about the documentation about how these things, which is available, obviously, you see that the queue here, the queue is when I'm tapping the search, it for each character, it will send a request. And if you actually look at the request, you'll see that response includes all kinds of weird thing here, usually in the JSON form, what it responds. As I'm doing this, I'm thinking, so what happens if I do delete? So if I do delete, see that there's no request being sent. So this is interesting. Why is no request being sent? Can it assume that it actually does this thing? And the caching that it does, the behavior of the application, is related to the API that I did. So it's kind of caching that. And you think about this like, I'm testing the page. No, I'm actually focusing on how the page uses the API. And I can do that. I can go to Mr. Postman. Where's my page? Mr. Postman. Please, Mr. Postman. And I can do the same thing here. I can copy that. And you see that what I copied, I just remove everything else because this is one of the things that I can play with. Send one query parameters and not all the things that I don't understand right now. And when I do that, you see, actually it returns HTML for some strange reason, not the JSON that it did before. And it's interesting why a different client will get a different response. Now, I wasn't aware that it actually, but this is a kind of a change from an older version that did the thing just got the response of the JSON. So things change over time, which is, again, something interesting. When we're trying to automate stuff, we kind of say, well, this will work forever. All the things that we don't know that will work forever, maybe exploration is something that we need to do over time again and again to see how things change, because we're building very complex machines. So we might impact, even if we don't know, behavior over time. So this is like something that I can play with arguments and stuff like that, and see how things are working. And the reason I can do this is because I have so much to play with. I have the URL, I have the method, I have the query parameters, which I can do all kinds of combinations with. I can play, this is a get, with the posts I can play with the payload that I'm sending here. I can play with different headers. Okay, here I'm accepting anything. What happens if I say, no, I want just to get a JSON? Okay, will it work? Nope, sends me HTML. Why is that? I don't know. Okay, not building that, but this is like a valid question. If I send a different kind of header, what will be the impact? And remember, this is not something that you'd probably automate because you want to learn how things are working. If it's in the spec that says, if you are asking for JSON, you will get JSON, then obviously this is a bug. You expect that. But how would you test that? How would you check that it actually got JSON? Well, you need to read this, get the response, try to convert it to JSON, fail and say, this is not real JSON. So this is something that we can do. And probably should do more, a lot more, but this is like another system. I'm going to show you something a bit more fun and interesting. Well, fun is really dependent on what your hobbies here. So what we're going to do is look for this guy. And the way we're going to look for this guy is through a site called ST Star Trek API. Yeah, we're search for him. And we're going to do the search for Spock. So obviously, if you wondered, is there somewhere that I can check API and that exposes API around Star Trek? Of course there is. So let me show you that. Let you go down. Yeah, so Stappy.co, I can go home, and it tells you all kinds of things that appear in Star Trek all over the years, characters, technology, whatever you. We're going to search for Spock. And if you do that, you need to actually say from here, I'm going to say, ha, I looked for that before. Interesting. Submit a query. And you can see there are 5 results. Okay. Now, how does it do it? It sends an API. So in order to play with it, I'm going to move to Postman. And what you're going to see now is recreation of the session I had around this API. And just using the single API, which I'm going to show you in a minute. Where is it? It's this one. So this is the URL we're doing. Everything is a post. There is some documentation on this on the site. So I didn't have any other, let's face it. There is documentation, I haven't read it. So my point of starting was I had to read something in order to see that it actually works and how it works. So remember, it told us that it had 5 results. And when you do that, the API that gets sent actually is not just the URL. It sends 2 arguments, the name and the title. Both of them is Spock. Now, this is the results first. This is a JSON. Remember, it looked like this, okay? So the funny thing, there's a Benjamin Spock, the child psychologist, but you can see that it doesn't have anything here. And so one of the things that you learn when you're exploring is, you might think about it, this is the only field that gets back? The answer is no. If you look here, Mr. Benjamin Spock, the UI doesn't show everything that it actually gets. So that's an interesting thing to say. But apart from that, we're starting our journey as it was like a while back. So my first question after copying this here was, well, which one is it using, the title or the name? So I tried something else. I said, well, I'm going to send title Spock and name Kirk and see what's happening. So let's do that. Some of it is happening live, and you see. And if you can see the page number, total elements, 15. Okay, so that's different than the 5 that we saw. And you see, oh, Aurelian, Kirk. You mentioned here as well. So obviously this brings Kirk results, different people named Kirk in Star Trek. So it kind of misses out on the title. So just to make sure, I said, well, hold on. Let's switch those. See if I instead sending the name Kirk and the title, I'll switch them and see what's happening. And you see, it goes back to 5. These are the Spock things. So from what I'm learning here is that it actually kind of ignores this thing. So I'm saying, well, that's cool. Let's see if I'm getting the same result if I just send name without the title. And when I do that, it's a while to get to the next galaxy, to the Enterprise. This is a problem with live demos, but I saved the result from last time. So let's look. It actually get the Spock. So I can learn that the title doesn't mean much when I'm searching for characters, at least. So I've learned that. I said, well, that's okay. What does the title actually mean? And this is like I said, this is a recreation of what I was thinking while I was building this session. I'm trying to learn as much as I can. So I said, well, title probably means one of the movies or whatever. So well, let's search for Spork with The Voyage Home, which is the fourth Star Trek movie. Only I want to see how smart it is. So I gave it like a partial title. Okay. So it's not Star Trek for The Voyage Home, and just The Voyage. And see if things are working. And if you do this, and actually everything returned, including Benjamin Spock, who was not in that movie. Kind of ignores the title. And I was thinking, well, maybe Voyage too short. I'll try to give it a bit more. So what I did was adding Voyage Home. Maybe this will work. Nope. Bring the whole list of Spocks. Okay, Voyage Home does work. Maybe the Voyage Home. And this became where it became very interesting because what I typed was this. See, I didn't, instead of the Voyage Home with a space here, I neglected to write the 20, which is %20 is the space between the voyage. And what happened is this. Usually, because I recorded that, this is the result. Okay, when you run it today, you get an error, and you see that you get a status 500, internal server error, and you see that, and which URL you actually, so that's interesting. And it also means that that I didn't get a nice user error. I actually broke the server in some way. I didn't understand exactly what I was looking at, but then I saw that. And the reason it took me not a lot of time to see that is because this is what happens today. When I did it first, this is what happened. So the same result, I saved it. Only instead of just having the error, I also got these things that today you can't see. And what I learned is that the server is written in Java. Now you think, well, what is this valuable? If I want to hack the system, I'd like to know how things are working on the inside. And some of the things that you learn is something that you didn't intend to actually do, but the server may expose information that may or may not be interesting to you or other people. And I'm guessing the way it works now, which doesn't expose this information like this, is something that is, well, something that we need to expose outside on an error. It's still not a nice error. If I'm the product owner or product manager of this, and I'm looking at this and say, well, this is what you're giving me if I have an error. Maybe you probably want to give me something like how I can fix my error or something. But that's just me. But you can see what the system exposes. So this is like very interesting stuff to learn. So I fixed my mistake, put in a space here. And as you can expect, still got the same 5 Spocks, including Benjamin here, which doesn't tell me. And I think I could have like created more and more tests around the full name. I decided to stop. All this, I'm talking a lot, but this took like 5 minutes, like because I'm looking at what I'm getting. I say, let's try this, and changing the query and running it and see. And if you have a server running, this is how it looks like. This is just a single API. Think about it. If you run different ways in different sequences, you can play a lot with the system. So I think this kind of broke me, and I said, well, maybe I should read the documentation a bit. But let's play with something else because I don't have enough time, a lot of time. So I did this. I looked at what is returned in terms of data. And you see that for Benjamin Spock, obviously there's not enough data, but for real Spock, I think this is the real Spock, the original Spock. You see the year of birth, and he has a blood type, which is T negative. He was even married at some point. And you see all kinds of fields that are interesting here. And I said, okay, let's try to find a Spock with the specific year of birth, because we've seen that. So I said, find the year of birth with 2269. Can you find it for me? And the answer, yes, but I also get you all the other Spocks as well, which not what I expected. So this is actually that I actually had to read the documentation, and I saw that some of the fields are not actually used as filters, including this one. I think this is where I actually look for maybe marital status is something that they can filter on. I think if you do that, nope, still that one. So I said, okay, the documentation is not that good. If I'm going to continue by that, I'm going to find a lot of stuff that it doesn't filter by. Let's go back to names and see what happens. Remember, I had, I could work with Benjamin Spock, but something else caught my eye. There's three people named Spock, but there's also Spock 2. Okay, so that's an interesting, but what can I do with Spock 2? So first, let's see if I'm searching for Spock 2 with a space in between, with the name, can I find him? Does it filter? Maybe it does that. Yeah, the answer is yes. This time it brings one Spock, which is Spock 2. And I said, great, it's actually the one that I was looking for earlier, and it actually brought the information. So this one works. Let's try to be a bit more smart. What happens if I remove the space here? Can it still find Spock 2? So I try this. Same Spock 2, no space. Let's see what happens. So didn't find anything. So it's not as smart as I thought it would be. And this is like something that I've learned. It's not like it's not smart. It treats spaces like the names must be exact when you're searching for them on the name. And we're concentrating on one field, right? So yeah, learn that as well. I said, okay, well, I think I saw that it was actually filtering if the character is from a mirror universe or not. So I said, let's check that. So let's look for Spock from the mirror universe. So mirror is a field there, Boolean field. And yes, it brought me one. And it is Spock. And the mirror universe is true. Excellent. It works. But this time I said, well, I have 5. Let's make sure that if it brings me 1, and I ask for the other 4, the mirror equals false, it actually brings me 4. So let's do that. So this one, search for Spock, not from the mirror universe, mirror is false. And I did that, and yes, it brought me 4. All of them are from our universe, not from the mirror universe. And I said, excellent. Let's try something again, see how smart it actually is. So what I did is I said, well, I'll put the whole name here, but instead in the mirror, I will not write false. Just FAL and see what happens. Get stuck again. It brings me 4. The same 4 with a mirror false. And I said, wow, that's pretty smart. It's not as smart as the Spock 2, but the mirror thing it does well. But then I said, 1 minute, I have experience with this kind of smart. Let's try the other way. So the other way is instead of true having, I sent a TR and I expected to have 1, right? This is the first one from the mirror universe. Brings me the ones with mirror equals false. So what I learned here is that unless you use true, it will always bring the false ones. So it's the way of filtering stuff. Interesting. Again, it's interesting. First, you want to see, like, is this a bug, not a bug? You can have this discussion later. but also, again, exposing information by accident that you might not want. Okay, at this point, I didn't have a lot of time. I want to check a couple more things. So I gave it Spock all lowercase, see if this works, because up until now it was capital S. And I want to see if the same results return. Yes, 5 Spocks are returned. If everything in uppercase, same results. Yes. And the final thing I wanted to say is, well, everything is returned in JSON. What happens if I ask this to return in XML? So how do I do that? So this is the same API, only in the headers, instead of accept everything, I said, I want to accept things, send me back only XML. Let's see what happens. Does it do that? So it doesn't do that. You see again, the result is not acceptable, which is a very weird English way to say, I'm not sending XML back. What you are accepting is not something that I can give you. And this kind of behavior is interesting because everybody's working with JSON. But a lot of things are like speak dual languages like XML and JSON, and they're kind of react different to different header fields. And you might want to play with that again and see what the results. So I did that, and this was my session. Single URL around not like 3-4 parameters, query parameters that I played with. And I learned how things are working when they're not working the way I expected. This is like a real session that I did on something that, apart from finding there's a Static API database, I didn't know anything about. So like when you're working in your day-to-day things, that means that you'll probably know what you're going to work against. You have more documentation, you know what to expect. But this is what it looks like in terms of API exploration. So actually, we found Spock more than once, more than one. So to summarize, exploration is a tool for us to learn how things are going to work in the real world. Automation is not. Automation is about confirming things that we expect. And it's nothing wrong with that. It's very good to have, especially when we're like chewing out releases after releases. But if you think about how complex the things that we are building and deploying and running, and how much of that is our code, well, they're very small. And there are things that can go wrong, and there are things that we assumed, or the developers assumed, that this is the way to build it. And as users, we kind of feel differently. If we're not going to look for these things, we won't find them. The users will. And for that, we need like to say like, okay, I'm a user, let's use that. And for being technical, like APIs are very technical. We have like tools that we can use and to see how things are working. And that means we can learn a lot, but we need to have times specified for that. If we're thinking like this is our time, manual testing and automation, and automation more and more becomes like our main focus, because this is our only way to fight complexity. While developers can create code and complexity in an exponential way, the only way to follow that is by more automation. And it makes sense economically, but if we just focus on automation, we won't see what actually happens. And it's very important. As you can see, you can find out things that are like, things are annoying or confusing, or maybe exposing information that you don't want to, maybe a way to like break down the server if you are vicious enough. So in order to do that, first you need to say, well, I need some time to do some exploration on the system. And then you can decide how to spend that time. It could be with the UI, with the APIs, a combination of both. And don't leave the APIs just for automation. And it's kind of because it's the technical thing, and it's easy to think about as, well, once it's working, and I'm checking that this is a JSON that is returned from this API. I check it into the automation pile, it will run automatically, and that's it. It's not that's it. You can learn a lot just by playing, and APIs are very ahead, a lot more. We haven't even touched about doing things in parallel or in sequence or out of sequence, which you can play as well. So think about that. And the next time when you're doing like a test for planning is plan for testing APIs, think about leaving time also for exploration. The universe is out there waiting for you. And that's what I wanted to share with you today. So if you have questions, put them in the chat. If you don't have any questions and you know where to find Spock, tell me. And it's not on that server, a specific Spock. Other than that, thank you very much for joining and hopefully listening. Thank you. As people are rushing in to write all kind of questions, this is all the ways you can get in touch with me. What's not in there is my YouTube channel. My mistake. I publish short videos and webinar recordings over there almost on a weekly basis. So I followed up that as well. All kinds of things, testing, development, stuff like that. Question by Alex. I have a question. How do you choose heuristic for exploratory testing? Oh, this is like a very big question. You can find something like, if you know SF Depot, you can, it is a nasty question, yeah. Wait for the answer. You can apply all kinds of heuristic, different test planning heuristics for APIs because they are not different than other things. And the same things you can talk about functionality, what kind of data, all applies to these things. Operation, you can say that you can translate that is people with authority, with people without authorization, the same API, what happens, what kind of behavior. So you can do that. And if you have enough experience, please do. It will help you think about all kinds of cases. There is some kind of an asterisk here. The more you think about it in advance, it may become less exploratory. You'll have a list of things that are interesting to check, and you may get to them. But if you kind of start going by the list, you kind of miss out of the things that you see and reacting to them. So remember to even things like SFTP or the one with the hats, whatever you like and have experience with, you can apply them to APIs as well. Leave room for curiosity, which is not heuristic, but something that you can actually learn a lot from. I hope that is answering the question. Maybe out of topic, can you explain how you export the APIs you want to test from something like DevTools to Postman? I actually copy-pasted them. I actually copy that and just put it. And this is usually not something that you probably need to do because this is coming out from outside the system. Usually you'll have access to the data, to the APIs internally or through internal tools that will in documentation that you can actually get that. So this is like actually someone from the outside grabbing what you need without any documentation and seeing what's live right now, what's being called, and using that. And after that, you can start playing. Like, you can look up the documentation and say, this is like not interesting to me right now. Let's see if it works with the same way without it and continue from there. This is what I did with the Google thing. Yeah, as a backend tester, how do I convince developers, product owner to justify spending time on API exploratory testing? Well, a lot of violence and threatening. Convincing. It's hard to convince anything in people. Okay, so we either show them the value or make them feel the risk. Usually, this is like when you're collaborating with testers and developers, when you're collaborating, the more it's a theory, but it's based on my experience. Like collaboration exposes a lot of things that we didn't think about originally, and this is like the developer talking. So the more I say, well, did you think about this or this case? And I found that this kind of surprised me. And it's not just APIs. Testing in general, it's like exposing a brand new world to the developers and saying, well, maybe we should think about different ways. And today we kind of stuck in a first automate first. Yes, but when you start talking about complexity, what's running, what actually running, how is your code a very bit small bits out of everything that's running, and everything can go wrong, can go bizarre. You start pulling them toward a different way of thinking. You can't convince them. People don't convince other people. They convince themselves. So it will be easier to pull in the ones that are a bit more open-minded, the ones that have seen weird things before. Like the junior people who were told that everything that they will do will work excellently. Yeah, you can't really convince them. Unless you do, like you pull authority or stuff like that. It's not convincing them. But the more findings that you do, and you can show, well, this could be found earlier if we did or check this thing, and maybe this would be a way to say, these are the cases that we need to automate next. More discussion, more collaboration will open more eyes and hopefully pull the developers into exploratory mode. The funny thing here is that they do exploration all the time. They just use debugger. Because unless, even when they're doing automation, they do, most of the time, people who are not doing test-driven development write the automated test only after the code is working. How do they know that the code is working? Well, they actually checked it. They explored it. They didn't have any automation to run before that. So they're actually doing that, but the developers call that debugging before tests are written. So you can say, well, do you want to see another way to debug? And some people do like to debug. I was like a debug master in my days. Can you suggest any other tools for API exploratory testing other than Postman? I think the trans APIs. I really recommend Postman. Proxyman. Don't know Proxyman. Should check this out. Why I like Postman for that, I have other ways to talk about Postman. But the one thing that Postman was really leading, and a lot of tools like took after that, is the visualization of data. And this is very important because we kind of run a technical thing, but it allows us to modify things and to get to the next step very quickly. If I was running this out of CLI with curl or something like that, it would be like the feedback cycle will not be like seconds between steps. Like minutes. And therefore, a graphic user interface, just like Postman, is very suitable for that because you can play with things visually and see exactly what happens very quickly. So any tool that can help you with that is good for that. you don't like Postman, other tools do the same thing. Even like the one I'm using in VS Code, the Thunder something that calls that's like mini Postman inside Visual Studio Code. Whatever, if it's visual for you and it's easier to play with the things, it's good enough to do that. Postman also does something that I haven't mentioned today, and other tools in some capacity do that as well, is that when you're trying to play with sequence of requests, it's very easy to move things around. So again, it's what you're actually looking for in terms of in APIs, like it's not like a single API. So it's easier to run sequences one by one and see what happens if you run something between not between, like to change the order and see what the sequence will do, because you're kind of simulating what will happen if things like come out of sync when you actually do that in the real world. So again, the tools that help me do this quickly will gain my support in terms of that. Other questions? By the way, if anyone has experience with Postman, it would be interesting if you put it in the chat to talk about this, because it would be news to me and explorations about learning. Are we out of questions? Out of topic? Is your Telegram channel a discussion group? I think in my Telegram channel, it's kind of empty. If you actually want to discuss something with me, it's Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. It's not a closed discussion group. Maybe I will do something like that in the future. Maybe Discord something. I don't know. I opened it. I published something once in a while there, but if you actually want to see a lot of the content that I put on is more through the regular social media. I think I had this kind of idea when I actually opened my Telegram account. Didn't follow through. In what context do you do exploratory testing? New in a job, another context? You can define your own context. So exploration is not, it's about learning how the system works. What is the system? It could be like entire system, like you're new to the system or you're new to the job and everything's working for the last 10 years, but you're interested how this specific feature is working. So it could be like a learning experience. But if you think about like more incremental development, then you want to see how this new feature is going. So how it's behaving. So when you're thinking about this, you're entering a new sprint. By the end of the sprint, you're expecting to have this feature live in production. So that means that it's built, it's tested in some way, it's automated in some way. And before like pressing the button to deploy that, you want to see how this feature handles when you're actually pressing button or calling APIs. So it could be like very small contexts, very big contexts. So you can define your own. I'm thinking about if you have a new API, you actually want to see how it works, either alone or in kind of with other APIs, and not the way it's the product or development tell you this is how it should work. So something new, it's something that you could, at the end, after you play with it, you can say, oh, this requires automation on this end to make sure that this works, or this doesn't work the same way I expected. It could be a bug. So it usually comes in the way of things that we are working on. Have you thought about ways to automate exploratory testing? There are ways to automate, but it's not about writing the assert. It's not about expectation. It's about getting, and you've probably done this before, when you automate stuff in order to get to a point when you can start doing some manual testing, you automated exploratory testing, just not the entire thing. You just automated you saved the time and money in order to get to a point when you can actually start. So automation in terms of exploratory, it's in that case, because the main thing that exploratory differs from regular testing is that you can't write an assert. If you could write an assert for that, then you could automate it. So automation inside within the context of exploratory testing is actually getting you to the point where it will save you time. So if you have like multiple sessions on this and you need a database full of data, maybe some of the work will be done in order to automate to get it to this point. But after that, you do the exploration, you can decide what the next step is. Full automation on what you've learned, or not. About randomness in tests, it could be like a learning experience. It's not just like what I'm sending, also how I'm sending it. It's very important to have a record of what you actually randomize, because if something happens, you need to reproduce it. But remember what exploration, one of the main things is, you need to react to something. If your tests will react to something, that's okay as well. You're kind of replacing yourself with the AI. But this is about what you see, what happens here in your head, and the next step. So it's not just randomizing calls. It's reacting to the responses, and this is like very hard to automate. Mutation testing it's not exactly like that. Mutation testing kind of check if I change this test, will I find a bug in the code, because the code is, there's no coverage in the code. Again, there's an assert. I'm checking against something that is expected result for that. And as long as it works, great. As long as it doesn't work, there's something wrong. I can't really do that with exploration. The step echo requests you sent were posted, but all the parameters you play with using the URL, which I believe are always get parameters. So it seems step echo is a mix of posts. For what I remember when I read it last time, everything is post there. And I used all my requests were post. Post. So even though that it's documented that it's read-only database. So, by the way, one of the interesting things about API and how flexible and complex they are is that they can actually do this with GET, right? I'm not sending any payload here. Because REST architecture is built on standards like HTTP and JSON, we can actually do that. Nobody tells anyone or calls the HTTP police if you actually done this in post. It's a free, sort of a free country, the internet. So in terms of how they can choose to implement it, that's their problem. It's kind of one of the things that I actually was asking in the beginning was, if it's read-only, why not do GET? But again, nobody making anyone do. Anyone can write their own interpretation of their APIs. Plus, I'm not affiliated with Star Trek APIs. I am affiliated almost from birth with Star Trek. Yeah. What else do we have? Automating an explicit assertion, but rather than gathering results to learn from them, just like you did. So I'm looking at Oleg's answer from 9 minutes past the hour. So it does complement. As long as you can keep the feedback cycle, I'm seeing something, I'm reacting. it falls into exploratory. Otherwise, it's like it could be exploratory, like you're reading logs. It's still, you learn from the system. It's not the only way to exploratory testing is not the only way to learn the system. You can read logs. It's boring. So you will learn how the system is doing. I think that the way that Elizabeth described it in her book, that it does include the reaction, the human reaction, in order to what you see. That's what actually keeps us sharp. Which, if you read logs before, it does the opposite. I wonder when you send the name parameter in the game at the same time as a post parameter in the body with different value, you can check that. You can say, well, the documentation is saying, oh, you need to do post. What happens if I do a get? Don't know. Let's check. Ha! Gets an OK. Returns something. Interesting. You can say, well, the documentation says you should use post. It's not exactly the same thing, I think. Yeah, you see that a lot more elements, total elements. It's not the same thing. Yeah. So this is interesting. Like, you learn something new. Maybe we need an AI tool that does exploratory testing by reacting to results of automated tests and create new tests. Yes, that's exactly what we need. Everyone should have one. Maybe two. Let them fight between them. Battle of the bots. Okay. I think we're coming to the end of our time soon, but at least to the end of the questions. If you have another question, this is your time to put in. For I go explore the universe. Actually, I'm going to explore the universe. But yeah. Okay, guys, Shuki and Orlin, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Thank you, Gil, for your time. I see there are a lot of questions, so I guess people really enjoyed your talk, and I hope you guys had fun. I learned a lot, so I think it's a really good evening. Great. So I will steal your screen, if I may.
I'm not sure if you can steal. I will stop share.
So
Yeah.
continue. Let me find my screen. Share. So I hope you can see my screen. So for the next month, thanks a lot, Gil, for your time again. And I hope we will see each other again here and you will give us another nice talk. So so our next speaker or our next event in April is from Nick, and he's a software architect, and he will talk about automation, the Cypress test and Playwright test using Kubernetes. So anyone who's interested in automation, please welcome to join. And I think that's all. And thanks a lot for joining us today and share the time with us. And thanks a lot for the very interesting questions and discussions. And I hope we will see each other soon next time. And have a great evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
See you next time.
Thank you very much.